The Bible has always been seen as a sacred text, a collection of writings that define the history of humanity's relationship with God. But what if I told you that within its pages lies a forgotten woman, a figure so powerful that the church chose to silence her story? Meet Lilith, the first woman created by God, according to ancient Jewish texts, a woman who has been erased from traditional scripture and whose power was deemed too dangerous for the patriarchal system that emerged within the church. Lilith's story is one that has been lost in the shadows, yet it is a story that holds a powerful secret, the forbidden power of a woman who defied the traditional roles imposed by society. Lilith is said to have been created as Adam's first wife in the Garden of Eden. Unlike Eve, who was created from Adam's rib, Lilith was created equally to Adam, made from the same earth. But when Lilith refused to submit to Adam's authority, she fled the garden, choosing to leave rather than live under his dominance. This rebellion set the stage for Lilith to become a symbol of freedom, independence, and the untapped power of women. This story is hidden from most people who read the Bible, and for good reason. Lilith's story doesn't fit with the traditional narrative of female submission that the church has long promoted. Instead, it challenges everything about how we view the roles of women and power in Scripture. Why was her story removed? Why was the story of a woman who refused to submit to male authority hidden from the canon? In the biblical narrative, Lilith's rejection of Adam's authority was seen as an act of defiance. And in the eyes of the patriarchal society that eventually developed, this defiance was dangerous. The church couldn't allow a figure like Lilith to be portrayed as strong and independent because it would have gone against the central idea that women should serve men. So, they silenced her. But the reality of Lilith is far more complex than simply a tale of defiance. In her story, we see the deep-seated fear of women's power that has existed for centuries, and a symbol of how the feminine energy was suppressed and demonized in many spiritual traditions. Lilith is not just a symbol of rebellion. She is a representation of the forbidden power that comes when women assert their sovereignty and refuse to be controlled. What makes Lilith's story so powerful is that she represents a force of nature, a raw energy that cannot be tamed or confined. She is often associated with sexuality, freedom, and wildness, qualities that have historically been suppressed in the portrayal of women in religious texts. Yet, these qualities are essential aspects of life, and by removing Lilith's story from the Bible, the church sought to erase a part of the divine feminine that didn't fit with their patriarchal agenda. In the Zohar, a foundational text of Kabbalah, Lilith is depicted as a demoness, a symbol of temptation, and the one who turns against God's creation. But this portrayal of her as a demon is deeply problematic. It's an attempt to cast her as something evil in order to discredit her. In truth, Lilith is a powerful archetype, one that embodies the untamed feminine, a woman who stands up for herself and refuses to be dominated. Her story speaks to a truth that many have tried to suppress, that women are divine beings, capable of both creation and destruction. But Lilith's power doesn't stop at her rebellion. She is a goddess figure who transcends the narrow roles imposed by society. Lilith embodies the power of self-empowerment, the ability to stand firm in the face of adversity and assert her will. She represents the divine feminine energy, which is often demonized and misunderstood, yet holds immense creative and spiritual power. Her defiance of Adam can be seen as an act of reclaiming her rightful place in creation, a place that was never meant to be subordinate. By walking away from Adam and refusing to return to the Garden of Eden, Lilith chose freedom. Freedom from the constraints placed upon her by a male-dominated society. And in doing so, she became a symbol for all women who seek to assert their independence and live authentically. The story of Lilith continues to unfold, revealing not just a rebellious figure, but a symbol of divine power that transcends the confines of traditional gender roles. Her legacy is not simply one of defiance, but of freedom, empowerment, and the embodiment of the divine feminine that the world so often tries to suppress. In the Talmud, the Jewish text that provides a framework for much of religious law and tradition, Lilith's story is further expanded, depicting her as the first wife of Adam. Unlike Eve, who was created from Adam's rib, Lilith was created from the same earth as Adam, signifying that she was meant to be his equal. This is a critical element in understanding why she rejected Adam's dominance in the Garden of Eden. Lilith's equality to Adam is at the core of her rebellion. She refused to submit to a role that reduced her to a secondary figure. Lilith's refusal to submit to Adam's authority in the garden was not an act of disobedience for the sake of chaos, but rather an act of self-respect and self-determination. In her departure from Eden, Lilith chose to embrace her own autonomy. She became the first symbol of independence for women, someone who dared to question the system that sought to confine her to a lesser role. In rejecting Adam's claim over her, Lilith sought to embody her right to sovereignty over her own body, choices, and spiritual path. But Lilith's story doesn't stop with her defiance. After leaving the Garden of Eden, she wandered the earth, a figure of untamed power. According to some ancient texts, Lilith then became a demoness who tempted men and wreaked havoc in the world, particularly by harming newborns. This demonization of Lilith was the Church's way of casting her as an evil figure, one who would serve as a warning against defiance and independence. By labeling her as a demon, the Church could discredit Lilith's message of empowerment and keep women from embracing their own power. Yet, to view Lilith purely as a demon is to miss the deeper spiritual significance of her story. Lilith's spiritual journey is one of transformation. After her fall from Eden, Lilith didn't simply seek to destroy or corrupt. Instead, she became a goddess figure in some traditions, representing the dark feminine, the untamed power of the earth, and the wild aspects of creation. She embodies the inner strength that refuses to be caged, a strength that is both nurturing and destructive, creative and destructive, in its raw, primal energy. In many esoteric traditions, Lilith is seen as the embodiment of the dark goddess, a symbol of transformation and the spiritual force that enables rebirth. She is the shadow that challenges individuals to face their deepest fears, confront their inner darkness, and ultimately transform. Her story is not just about rejection, but about embracing the wildness within and understanding that this wildness is part of the divine nature. Lilith teaches us that true empowerment comes from embracing all aspects of ourselves, even the shadow that society often seeks to reject. Lilith's place in the Bible and in religious history is complicated because she represents the untamable aspects of the feminine and the divine that challenge authority and hierarchy. She is not a passive figure who serves a man's will, but a force of nature that refuses to be subordinated to anyone. This rebellion is precisely what makes Lilith such a powerful figure. She refuses to conform to the standards set for her, and in doing so, she redefines the concept of womanhood. For centuries, the Church sought to suppress Lilith's story, but as we continue to reclaim her story, we also reclaim a part of the divine feminine that has been overlooked, ignored, and demonized. Lilith represents the power of women to assert themselves, to stand up for their rights, and to claim their divine sovereignty. Her story is a lesson in self-empowerment, showing that sometimes the path to true spiritual freedom requires us to defy authority and embrace our authenticity, even when society rejects us. In modern times, Lilith has become a symbol of empowerment for many, particularly within feminist and spiritual circles. She has been reclaimed as a figure who embodies not just defiance, but also autonomy, strength, and freedom. In reclaiming Lilith's legacy, we are reminded of the importance of honoring our own inner wisdom and embracing the fullness of our being, without fear, shame, or guilt. As we reach the end of Lilith's story, we see that her legacy is not one of rebellion for the sake of chaos, but one of spiritual awakening and empowerment. Lilith's refusal to submit to Adam, her rejection of patriarchal authority, and her embrace of freedom make her one of the most powerful figures in religious history. But her story has been so deeply misunderstood and suppressed because it speaks to a truth that threatens the status quo of male-dominated institutions. Lilith represents the untamed feminine, a force of nature that cannot and will not be confined. Her rejection of Adam in the Garden of Eden is not an act of disobedience for the sake of rebellion, but a refusal to accept a submissive role that goes against her divine nature. In this, she embodies the very essence of empowerment, the ability to choose one's own path and live authentically, no matter the consequences. The way Lilith's story has been demonized is a reflection of the way that society has historically demonized the divine feminine. For centuries, the church and other patriarchal institutions feared the raw, untamed power of women. They feared that if women were allowed to express their true power, society would collapse, and the hierarchical system that gave men dominion over women would crumble. That's why Lilith was branded as a demoness, because she threatened the foundation of patriarchal rule. But Lilith is not evil. She is not the villain of the story. She is the heroine. Lilith teaches us that true spiritual awakening comes from embracing all parts of ourselves, the light and the dark, and living without shame, fear, or guilt. She represents the power of self-awareness, the strength that comes from standing up for yourself, and the freedom to create your own destiny. In today's world, Lilith's story is more relevant than ever. As women continue to assert their power, demand equality, and fight for their rights, Lilith serves as a symbol of empowerment and liberation. Her message is clear. Women do not need to submit to a man's will to be whole or divine. Women can be powerful, independent, and divine in their own right. And in a world that still seeks to limit women's power, Lilith's story is a reminder that the divine feminine can never be truly suppressed. But Lilith's story also holds lessons for all of humanity, not just women. She challenges us to look within and ask, are we truly free? Are we living authentically, or are we conforming to the expectations of others? The freedom that Lilith represents is not just for women. It is for everyone who seeks to break free from the chains of societal expectations and live according to their own truth. The figure of Lilith also offers us a new vision of the divine. Traditionally, God is often viewed as a male figure, and women have been excluded from the highest spiritual roles. Lilith, however, represents a divine feminine that is just as powerful and transformative as any masculine force. Her story calls us to reclaim the divine feminine within us, and to honor the balance of both masculine and feminine energies in the world. The true power of Lilith lies not in her rebellion, but in her ability to live authentically. She does not conform to the expectations of others, nor does she bow to the power of male authority. Instead, she stands as a figure who represents the strength that comes from within, and the freedom to be who we truly are. Lilith's legacy is one of empowerment and liberation, not just for women, but for everyone who seeks to awaken to their divine potential. The forgotten woman of the Bible is Lilith, and her story is a reminder that true freedom comes from within. Lilith is the untamed feminine force that refuses to be contained, the divine power that cannot be controlled. Her message is one of self-empowerment, freedom, and authenticity, values that are as relevant today as they were in ancient times. The time has come for Lilith's story to be rediscovered. It's time for us to embrace the divine feminine within each of us, to reject the limitations placed upon us by society, and to step into our own power. Lilith shows us that we are all capable of creating our own destiny, and that the divine spark within us is uncontainable.